I find too that it's easier for us to take action then because we know what the root cause is and we know, okay, this is part of what we need to do to heal. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of resistance.
No, that's what's so fascinating. I feel the exact same way. It's almost like you're eager to be done with it because once you see it, you can't unsee it and you're just like, "Oh my god, well like let's fix that immediately." And it's really fascinating because I wonder that sense of like let's fix that immediately and I can't unsee it and I want to take the right action, does that come from your head or does that come from your soul's desire to make these changes? I don't think it's this thinking thing. I think it comes from this deeper sense of like truth and intuition, like that has to be fixed.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. What if your body isn't betraying you, but trying to speak to you? Every ache, every symptom, every wave of fatigue? Could it be your soul's way of calling you back home to yourself? Well, my guest today, Christine Ruch, turned her journey with multiple sclerosis into a path of profound healing and spiritual awakening. She now guides people to reconnect with their bodies, soothe their nervous systems, and rediscover the divine wisdom that's been within them all along. If you've ever wondered what your body might be trying to tell you, or how faith, energy, and intuition can ignite true healing, this conversation's for you. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, let's go chat with Christine. Christine, welcome to the show. I'm so delighted you could join us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on your show. It's a pleasure.
So much of our culture trains us to fight symptoms instead of listening to them. What shifted when you started listening instead of fighting?
Well, I think it's the beginning of like having respect for your body trying to talk to you and recognize that it's not something to be denied, but actually we're in co-creation with our body at all times, our head is connected to our body. So I think the sooner you can actually have respect for your body and recognize that there's some wisdom there to be learned. And also not just listen and not just recognize that there's wisdom, but also to learn how to take aligned action. And when you do that, then your body is delighted and starts to talk to you more, and you create a total new relationship with yourself.
How does somebody begin to trust their body when they receive a life altering or terminal even diagnosis?
Well, I don't know if it's about, maybe it's not necessarily about learning to trust as the first step, but maybe the first step is to sit and recognize that there's something deeper happening and there's a deeper transmission that wants to come through about your state of health and what brought that about. And also, do you what is your belief system and what is your belief structure about the healing path and your own capacity to heal? And if you can sit with yourself and determine, do you authentically believe that it is within your capacity to heal? Then I think that that is the thing that opens the door to a little bit more curiosity and inquiry into the next steps, But I think it's really about addressing your belief structure first and foremost, and whether or not this is societal conditioning or whether or not this is a true felt sense of like, I know that there's something more here, or I'd like to explore this more deeply than like what conventional society says or your doctors say or things like that. So I think it's a matter of determining too is like what's really in your heart and what's in your soul, what's in your body, and not so much like this mental construct. And then so starting there with just like really looking and thinking about your belief structures.
Well, and along those lines, many people that are given a chronic illness diagnosis or a terminal, again, I'm using air quotes, terminal diagnosis like you were, how do you keep that in line? Please tell everybody, tell all of us about your journey and when you were given your diagnosis about what that was, what your initial reaction was, and then how you've overcome it over these past several years. It's quite an inspiring journey.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, I guess, and this kind of maybe goes back to your original question, like, where do you start? And I think a lot of times you start slow and small. You don't need to just make these big, grand moves necessarily, because that's really discomforting for your body and your nervous system and your belief structure. And I don't know that we all move in that way. But I think to answer your question specifically, um, yeah, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 20 years ago in 2006. And I had young children. My daughter was 3 and my son was 5. And so like when I said about starting small, I had always had an aversion, not just an aversion, but like a physical aversion to pharmaceutical medication. Like I was always sick and had side effects, and it didn't agree with my body. And so I was really nervous to undergo pharmacology and, the traditional mainstream treatment for MS. And so I just thought, well, I should go on a diet because I was like so sick. And I thought, well, I need to be healthier to withstand the rigor of pharmacology and pharmaceutical intervention. And so I was like, well, I guess if I try to go and and give myself a little bit of a health boost, then I'll be able to withstand. At that time, 20 years ago, it was an injection, which I felt like was a little bit dramatic for me and for my children to see me injecting myself with medication. And so I did. I just went on this food elimination diet. And now, by the way, I had the help of a naturopath, and we had a lot of good data markers and a lot of blood work and things like that. So it was very targeted elimination diet. And I did that for 6 weeks. But the thing is, it's so funny how sometimes it's the smallest door that opens that you don't expect. And that leads you into a whole nother world. And that's exactly what happened to me. It started as this idea that I would just, make myself stronger. And then after 6 weeks, the results of changing my diet were so transformative, and they had reversed my symptoms so completely that I felt like I wanted to continue to pursue that path of natural wellness and not necessarily turn around and pursue, pharmaceutical intervention. So I think it just started small with like an innocent idea that turned into something that's shaped the last 20 years of my life.
Well, you were led. That was divine.
I was led.
That was divine intervention, whatever you
Yeah,
wanna
it
call it,
really
divine
was.
providence.
Mm. No, I really
What were
believe
your
that too.
symptoms when you first went to the doctor? Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So it was a Wednesday morning in January of 2006. I don't remember exactly the day, but I remember it was a Wednesday and I remember it was January. And my kids were in bed with us, rolling around as little babies do with their footy PJs on, and our dog and everything like that. And my husband got out of bed to go and start breakfast for the kids, and they went racing after him. And I got out of bed and I bent over to pick up my sweatpants where I left them on the floor before the night before. And I had this sharp pain down the back of my neck and down my spine and down through my legs and into my feet, called a Lermite symptom. And that means like barbershop syndrome in like French. And it's a particular nerve pain that's precipitated by the movement of your neck down. And it's a hallmark first classic symptom of multiple sclerosis. And it started with that. And when I had that sensation, it was so strong. It like almost knocked me to my knees, and it almost made me vomit because I knew immediately like that was not right. Like that was outside of the realm of normal human experience and emotion and like feelings and sensations in the body. And then from there, that was in January, and I wasn't diagnosed until March. And then from there, and then I started my elimination diet in June. Um, but from then January until June over those course of those 6 months. Then they gradually became weaker and weaker and lost most of the sensation in my legs. That was my primary symptom outside of that hallmark, head movement. And yeah, I had very limited mobility in my legs. I could only last a couple of hours a day, lots of fatigue. Um, yeah, numbness, pain, tingling. Yeah, lots of weakness.
MS is really hard to diagnose in
Mhm.
many people, and it can be
Mhm.
years before they
Mhm.
come up with a diagnosis. And normally, it's lesions that show up in the brain or in the
Mhm.
spine. Did you
Mhm.
have those showing up on
Yep.
MRIs?
Yep, both of them. Yeah, for sure. I had an MRI and then, a diagnosis from a neurologist, and you could see as plain as day when you put the MRI up on the screen or whatever they have. You can totally see, like, the polka dots in your spine and your brain, and so, yeah, it was pretty obvious.
And what
Yeah.
did the doctors tell you when they first said, "Okay, we believe this is MS?" Were you told there's no way to heal from it? Were you told, "Well, we're just gonna have to take care of you as best we can, and you're gonna continue to degrade in your walking ability," and all that? I mean, how was it doom and gloom? Was it hopeful? Was it
They did, like, a neurological workup just to kind of make sure, like, see, like, what my gait was and my hand-eye coordination and those type of things, and then, they diagnosed me with MS, and they told me about the drugs that were available at that time, and at that time, that was what we called the ABC drugs, and, I don't even remember them now because it's been 20 years, but, they were all injections, and, Copaxone was the one that they wanted me to go on. And yeah, they basically I of course, I think as a lot of people inquire potentially, I did inquire like, "Well, is there anything I can do?" 'Cause I had actually no idea that there was anything I could do dietarily, like, that was I was not in that level of awareness at that point in time of my diagnosis necessarily, even though I saw a naturopath and I had a natural childbirth and that kind of stuff. But geez, like you wouldn't ever imagine that an autoimmune disease or even a disease that affects your brain and your spinal cord could be mitigated by food. That was sort of, especially 20 years ago, that was sort of radical. And, so at any rate, I did ask, like, "Is there anything I can do lifestyle-wise?" And, they were like, I mean, it was basically like the American food pyramid kind of suggestions, and definitely it was not at all recommended that I do anything natural to treat the disease. I mean, it was flat out, like, "You will continue to decline, and you'll be blind and in a wheelchair." So, this was the
Thanks,
thing that they
guys.
wanted me to do.
I
Yeah.
were you exposed to mold before you were diagnosed?
That's such a really good question. I
That's coming in
actually
that's a divine download that keeps coming in. She was exposed to mold first
oh,
before
yeah.
this came in.
Yeah, that's such a great question to ask. I wonder the house that we were living in was a flat-roofed home because we lived in Arizona at the time, and it was a stucco home from the '70s, like an old, beautiful home that we remodeled, and I wonder, because it was a flat roofed home, if it had mold in it, because that was when my first symptoms were. But what I think is really fascinating about you asking that question is that we moved from Arizona to Boulder, Colorado, and the home that we moved into was like the beginning of like a decade long journey of environmental illness. And that house absolutely had mold. And it was a whole process that took us about 10 years to get to the bottom of it because sometimes, as there is mold, but there's also full environmental contaminants as a result of the mold. So it's not always just the mold itself. And then the presence of the mold can like amplify EMFs and can amplify a lot of other environmental things in your home that amplify the mold that then lead to increased symptomology in your body. So I definitely had a whole mold chapter of my healing journey, a decade-long mold
Yeah.
chapter.
I'm
Yeah,
hearing that. I get what I call divine downloads,
I
Christine.
bet
Well,
you do.
even before I get somebody on my radar, and I'm hearing she had big mold exposure, big
Big mold
mold exposure.
exposure.
The
Yeah,
other
no
the other
question.
thing too, with you living in Arizona, and I've seen this with several clients where they're diagnosed with MS or cancer even, and
Mhm.
they have lesions in their spine, in their brain, in their lungs, and other body parts, and when I scan them, first of all, I'm seeing the mold. Second of all, I especially in people that live in the desert, valley fever is a really big deal, and that's a fungal
Totally,
infection, and it looks
totally.
like lesions in the body, and I'm like a human MRI, so I can see inside the body. It's like I'm looking at an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI. And I've had multiple clients over the years where they've had a diagnosis like you and or a cancer diagnosis. And I'm going, this is a fungal infection. You need to be on an antifungal. And it's hard sometimes for them to get the prescription filled of an antifungal. The doctors just are not believing it, but they respond really fast to the
Mhm,
antifungal and those lesions go away.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
I'm not saying that MS isn't a real thing, it is, and the symptoms can mimic mold exposure, valley fever exposure. There are lots of commonalities between the 2. And it's interesting to me that you've mentioned that diet really played such a big role. And of course it did because it's helped your body detox. Tell us about that. Tell us about what did you start on with your diet? What did you remove? Were you how quickly were you seeing results? What kind of results were you seeing?
Well, I love everything that you just said because I'd like to actually go back to this whole idea of mold and valley fever and because there's a lot of crossover, right? Because valley fever is a fungal infection and then mold is, fungal related. And it's a mycotoxin and it affects your body. And so I want to suggest that actually having either of those in your body as your body's building a symptomology for you to address. That symptomology is um, like exacerbating your nervous system. And then that comes across as a biomarker of multiple sclerosis. And so, what is at the root of that mess? And is at the root of the MS, is it this mold or this fungal infection? Now, there could be many things that exacerbate that and exacerbate your nervous system. Um, And so that's not even to say that you may have already had disturbances in your energy field and in your nervous system prior to the mold or the valley fever, right? And then that could end up being like the straw that breaks the camel's back or the thing that pushes that symptomology to a threshold that your nervous system can no longer tolerate. And then you start to express symptoms. Now, the interesting thing about what I just said and what you just said is then back pivoting over to diet. So a lot of the diet, you are actually on because I also tested positive for candida. Well, I mean, right? So
Yeah.
you
Which is
you
another
have
fungal
this
infection.
it's
It's
another
all
fungal infection in your
right.
body, right? And so a lot of times, most elimination diets are ones that remove all of these inflammatory foods. And a lot of the inflammatory foods also fall into the type of foods that exacerbate candida, which then, of course, goes to the valley fever, goes to the mold. And that would be like cheese and cured meats and mushrooms and fermented foods and things like that. A lot of those things are pulled out of your diet in a strict elimination diet where you are getting your body to an ultimate state of calm so that it doesn't have anything to fire on in so far as the food that you're eating because you eat 3 times a day and so or more and so it's the fastest way of really calming your body's nervous system and calming everything in your body and it's interesting because in so far as the elimination diet is concerned then you are removing a lot of the things that are inflammatory just and a lot of those things are also mold related.
Well, and sugar in anything that's
Yep,
processed
sugar,
leads
yep,
to
exactly,
yeast.
mhm.
Another interesting point of it,
Sugar, alcohol, like yeah.
yeah, it's alcohol's like a sugar IV.
Yeah, yeah,
You don't even have
totally.
to digest it. But
Yeah,
I see yeast so often in people who leaky gut, yeast, wherever there's mold exposure, there's always a yeast overgrowth. They're like kissing cousins. They go hand in hand. And the other thing that I see a lot is when people are diagnosed with Lyme, even if they have a tick bite, they got a mold exposure. I would say 97% of the time. And they've got yeast overgrowth and they've got leaky gut. We fix their gut, the rest of those symptoms go away. And another point that's really interesting too is you can have 4 people like you did, living in a moldy environment, and you're the only one affected, because 30% of the population can't tolerate being in a moldy environment. I'm one of them. I'm like the canary in the coal mine. You are too,
me
I know you
too.
are. I can walk in a room, I can tell you in a nanosecond,
Me
there's a
too.
mold problem. My husband's oblivious. He's like, "Oh, I don't smell
Yeah,
anything. I don't see anything." I go, "Great,
yeah,
honey, I'll meet you in the car. I'm not standing
yeah,
here." And my guess is you're the same way.
100%. Yeah, for
So
sure.
your other family members weren't affected, but you were affected.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I mean, first, I want to go back to what you were saying before about how, like, we're so sensitive and we can smell it. And I can smell it. And I walk in, I live in Costa Rica and I live in Boulder, Colorado, both places. And I'll walk into a place in Costa Rica and I know, like, in a second, and I walk right back out, or a restaurant. I'm very, very sensitive like that as well. And when you were talking about leaky gut too, I wonder, it's almost like, they're so, like you said, kissing cousins. They're so interrelated. And like the mold degrades your microbiome and it changes your whole microbiome which then facilitates the degradation of your gut lining which then exacerbates your inflammation. And so it's a whole feedback loop, right? And so I spent so much of my time really without knowing that I had the mold at that time, really just all about healing my gut, healing my gut, healing my gut. And it was a very long journey of trying to heal my gut, get rid of the mold and get rid of the candida and the fungus and heal my gut and heal my gut over and over and over. And and so you could only do so much of that work if you're not looking at the mold, right? Like that's in your environment. Because there's only so much you can do insofar as your diet is concerned without then looking at your external environment as something that's also exacerbating your symptomology. And then to go into my family, so it was my husband and my 2 children and and of course, I was like, I was a mess, but so were my children. And I will also say something about your husband too, and you probably know this as well. There's something about testosterone that's super protective against these type of mycotoxins and things like that. Men don't seem to be as related to, like, as symptomology is concerned, to mold aggravation. Something about the testosterone itself is protective. So my daughter had all kinds of health problems, and but of course nobody said to her that it was mold. And my son did too. He had these migraine headaches all the time. Was my husband, but oh, he also had ulcerative colitis. So did we all have symptomology of it? For sure. But could anybody actually tell us, I think that you're living in a moldy house? You know, it wasn't until I actually found the mold that I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what's going on. And now, fast forward, that we moved out of that house in 2019. My son graduated from high school in 2018. So then he was gone to college and things like that. And a lot of the things that my daughter was struggling with her health all resolved because she was out of the moldy house. And a lot of the challenges that I was like constantly battling and struggling were all resolved immediately because we were out of the moldy house. And so I think that that's really interesting. If we were out of the moldy house to begin with, would I've ever gone on a 10-year journey to heal my gut, you know?
Probably
It's so
not.
hard. It's
But
so
but
hard to tell, right?
you were being led, and thank God you were listening to what spirit was sending you in the form of messages, because that's so random. Well, you need to work on your diet. For most people who are very ensconced in our Western medical model, they just think they're screwed with this
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
And what I've seen in working with literally tens of thousands of people over the years doing this energy healing and medical intuition stuff is that the body has the capacity to heal absolutely everything. Absolutely
Yes, it
everything.
does.
It's miraculous. And you're
It's
living proof of
miraculous.
that. So let's go back to the diet part. You eliminated probably refined things, anything that was in the mold family, anything that was fermented. How soon did you start to see results, and how did you determine what were gonna be the food groups you were gonna remove? And did it
Yeah.
come in stages, or did you just go cold turkey, no more sugar, no more processed stuff, no more
Mhm.
whatever?
Yeah, it was a thank you for that question. It was a food sensitivity panel. And you know how a lot of times the food allergy, it's just things that your body is responding negatively towards. And so it was a food sensitivity panel and it showed I was sensitive to like, I don't know, like 79 different foods. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then I also tested positive for celiac disease. And so it was dairy, it was egg, it was all gluten, it was all grains. I did a Cyrex panel as well, and that was like all grains. And that's a panel that shows if you're cross reactive to different types of glutinous. It's like sesame and chocolate, and these things don't have, or gluten free grains or grains in general that don't have gluten in them, but your body will create a cross reactive um, immune response to it as if it is gluten. And so it was a highly targeted elimination diet. And then I eliminated all the food groups. And so, like,
What did you
one of
eat?
the
What is
right?
what's left? What did you eat?
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what I ate in just a minute. And then so I removed the entire food family or food group. So, like, let's say cruciferous vegetables, because like I was sensitive to broccoli and Brussels sprouts. Well, those are crucifers. So then I removed the entire cruciferous family from my diet. And then melon, cantaloupe, but cantaloupe can be cross reactive to like mold. But, so then I removed every melon from not just like cantaloupe, but every melon, or like I reacted to salmon and trout. So I removed all fish from my diet, not just salmon and trout. So I'll put a pin in your question and go back to this whole idea of that we all eat in a box, right? A lot of us eat very, very the same food over and over and over again and have like a mono diet. And the world of food is vast, and so I think that what ends up happening over time as well is that your body becomes so accustomed to the food that you eat that you're no longer actually reaping the nutritional benefits of that said food, like over and over and over again. I almost like have this really silly analogy, kind of like when somebody first starts drinking alcohol and it's like you have a half a beer and you're like, woo. And then pretty soon, you can have like two or three beers and you're like, I feel fine. I could drive home from this party. And it's like you build this tolerance. And so your body builds this tolerance to the nutrient density available in the foods that you eat over and over and over and over again. And so I think that so then what I did, building upon those two things that I just shared, removing the entire food group and then really looking at how we create this mono diet. And so then we created this diet for myself that was all of the food groups that there was a lot of food groups I'd never eaten and I didn't really pay much attention to. And because, you're just so used to eating like the same food over and over again. And so you get to find all sorts of new foods that you've
Such
never eaten
as, what
before.
are some of the new foods that you discovered?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't even know now. It's been 20 years since I did that diet. But I definitely know it was a trip in the grocery store to be like, okay, like I had a whole grid of the different foods that were in each botanical family. And it was
Mhm.
like, oh, this is in a different botanical family than that. So, like, for example, I couldn't eat anything in the nightshade family, but I could eat tomatillos because tomatillos are not in the nightshade family. And so it was like, oh, okay, so I could make a tomatillo salsa and not a tomato salsa. You know what I mean? And so just like little things like that, or things that you might not have eaten very much of, but you realize, like, okay, well, that's a safe food. So then you eat more of that. And so then I would create a diet that was a rotation diet. So I was never eating that same food any more than once a week, or like actually every 4 days. Oh my gosh. And then it could even go deeper. It gets a little bit intense, but it's worth it. Um, and then so my primary meal would be dinner. That would be the new like foods. And then I would make enough food at dinner for lunch the next day. So then I would eat that for lunch the next day, and then I have a new dinner, and then that would be my lunch the next day, and then I make a new dinner, and that would be my lunch the next day. So I did it like that, and then yeah, I didn't eat the same food group. Every 4 days, I would rotate through food groups, like food families, botanical families, and so yeah, like wild game and all kinds of different things that I wasn't accustomed to eating. But and then after that 6 weeks, you asked me if I went all in. I did go all in. Uh, that definitely created a lot of Herxheimer's reactions. There's a lot of detoxing and a lot of herxing, and I don't know if everybody in your audience knows what that is.
No, please
Um,
explain.
yeah, so a Herxheimer's reaction is when your body starts eliminating toxins out faster than your actual body can eliminate them because we have a pathways of elimination, and so those can get overwhelmed and overburdened in the elimination process when you're eliminating more toxins than your body can naturally rid itself of. And so then those toxins build up in your system and they cause flu like symptoms. You can have a lot of headaches and gastrointestinal distress and feel very flu like symptoms, a lot of like malaise, body aches, joint pain, things like that. And so, yeah, I had to mitigate a lot of that as well, like early on. I remember my naturopath, though, was so excited when I started having Herxheimer's reaction because she was like, this means, you might feel terrible, but it means like you're on the right path. It means like this is really your body is really wanting to express and expel all of these toxins that are built up in your system. So, at any rate, the long and the short of it is the first 2 weeks were miserable. But then the herxing was done and I was in the groove and all my all of my I had a lot of like addictive sort of like I was addicted to dairy and gluten and I wanted to have all of the things back in. But all of that was sort of past. And then I started feeling better and better and better. By the end of 6 weeks, I was like, felt like a completely new person. So
And how were your MS symptoms? Did you get
completely gone.
completely gone in 6 weeks with changing your
Hmm.
diet? Whoa,
Hmm.
girl, that's a big
Hmm.
statement. That's a big
It's a
statement.
huge statement. So
Were
I
you
never
on
needed to
meds?
go back. It was so powerful for me that I was like, okay, well, something massive is here. I'm going to keep on this path and keep going in this direction because it was so transformative for me.
Were you on the medication? Were you on the injections then? Did you ever do the
No,
injection?
I never did because I felt like I thought that I would do the injections after I did this elimination diet once I felt stronger, never ever imagining that it would actually reverse the symptoms of the disease. So once it did, I thought, well, I will start pharmaceutical intervention if I ever have an exacerbation that is as bad as or worse than my initial presenting symptomology. And now I did have a lot of dark places during the mold chapter where I went blind in my right eye and had optic neuritis and definitely had a number of health scares and exacerbations, but none of them were like the very first ones. So I just kept on going. Once I figured out it was mold, then of course my vision came back and so many things healed on their own. So I just started getting stronger and stronger in my belief system around how, just like what you said, how our body were built with these divine healing codes already within us. And it's just so powerful. And I love connecting, and probably you do too. I love connecting people with the truth of their own capacity to heal.
Mhm. Well, and nobody ever
Yeah.
heals anybody else. We all heal ourselves.
Yeah, we're all
You
healing is
know, you're
self-healing.
your naturopath was not healing you. Your
Yeah.
naturopath was directing you on how you could heal yourself. What
Yep.
so, what happened when you went back to did you ever go back to the doctors that gave you the
Yeah.
initial diagnosis,
I
and did you
I
have
did.
further MRIs and scans, and what happened with the lesions?
Yeah, it's funny because I did go back to my first neurologist, and now we were living in Arizona at that time, as I said. So, um, I did go back to one more neurology appointment with him, and totally he denied that what I was doing. He thought that it was a short-term fix. It wasn't something that could be a long-term solution to this disease. And I was just really offended by that because it just kind of like went in the face of what was my lived experience and I don't know, I just couldn't imagine like maybe the next day, let's say I would wake up with those symptoms again, but it didn't just didn't feel true to me, you know? And then we moved to Colorado and moved to Boulder, and I saw a neurologist here in Boulder, and it was a woman, and I had an MRI and all, and the lesions were less and not in the same places. So I had fewer lesions and I had new lesions, but the old lesions were not exactly the same place as you know what I mean? And so that was an interesting thing to me to observe and see, but also she didn't encourage me on my path as well and really tried to pressure me into pursuing pharmaceutical intervention. And by then, I had already gotten my degree in holistic nutrition and I was already pursuing, I had so many other amazing healers on my healthcare team that I was learning so much from that I felt more empowered by the knowledge that I was getting in working with them, almost in a mentorship capacity, because I was so curious and really receptive to everything that they were sharing, and almost like I was like my own guinea pig as I was learning from them. And that was way more empowering for me than anything that the neurologist would share. And so, truthfully, I haven't seen a neurologist or had an MRI in I don't know how long. Maybe 12 years?
But you don't have any
Maybe.
symptoms anymore?
You know what? I kind of don't, but I do. Like, if I were to go and eat like a full glutinous pizza, yeah, I would. Tomorrow, I would have my feet would be tingling, my legs would be numb. Or if I do things that exacerbate my nervous system. Right now, a lot of my work is really centered around like we can do all of these modalities to fix our external environment or fix our body, like mitigating our environment because of environmental mold or any other environmental things that happen. Or we can change our diet for sure. But what if we also, in addition to those things, we really also look at how we can manage our nervous system? And as opposed to outsourcing our nervous system to the neurologist, what if it is also within our power, just like we heal our gut and things like that? What if it's also within our power to change our relationship with our nervous system and we have the power to do that? And and then what if the nervous system responds just like your body responds, like your nervous system wants to heal, just like all the rest of the parts of your body. And so once we start really dressing the nervous system, um, then the healing is so fast, it's sort of astounding. So to answer your question, do I have symptoms? Yeah, if I have a certain something that exacerbates my nervous system, yeah. But as soon as I address that, then my nervous system says, "Oh, good, thank you. Thank you for addressing that." Kind of like you have a headache and you drink more water or whatever, or you have low blood sugar and you eat. As soon as you address what your nervous system is telling you, then my symptoms go away. So I don't need to take any sort of pharmaceutical drugs for it.
When you were having a reaction to pretty much everything that you were eating, you were in what I would call a mast cell response, and I
Yes.
tell people it's like your bucket's full and you put
Yes.
a few drops of water in that bucket and it's going to overflow. So of course,
Yes.
your immune system is so high alert that
Totally.
anything that comes in is just going to be 5 alarm fire.
Yep.
And it's interesting how we can get that down. How do you regulate your nervous system now?
Mm. Well, it was a long process of unwinding my nervous system. I don't think that we recognize how much our nervous system holds everything that's ever happened to you in your life. It holds all past traumas. And and it builds defense mechanisms to keep you safe, even if ultimately they're not for your best highest self.
Can you give us an
Um,
example of that?
well, like for example, we keep ourselves safe, but sometimes what is safe in our mind isn't necessarily safe in our body. So, like, you could stay in the same relationship because it's safe, but what if the relationship is toxic and not good for your nervous system? Is that really safe? Or, like, for example, I had a job that I thrived on. I thought that it was like, I'm a chef and I had 3 food businesses in Boulder for a decade. And they were so popular and they were incredibly successful. And it was like a dream come true. And, but also, my brain kept me completely immune to the stress. I couldn't even see the stress. I felt like I was thriving. I felt like it was the best thing ever. And it was the way I lived my life in service of keeping my nervous system dysregulated. But I didn't see that. I just thought that I was doing a really, really good job of balancing a million things all at once and keeping myself hyper busy to the max. And I thought that that was just how I thrived and who I was. But that's not how anybody thrives. I don't think that anybody thrives like that. But but so that's an example of where my brain had this idea of like, this is great. This is a perfect job for you. This is in service of the community and all the stories that I told myself, while at the same time, my nervous system was just constantly shot. And I thought that I didn't have any relationship with my nervous system. And I thought I could just make kale smoothies and keep my lifestyle really, really tight and have the perfect diet, and the perfect sleep hygiene, and the perfect water, and the perfect environment, and perfect lighting, and like kind of micromanage my environment. And now that right there, just me saying that is a lot of tension and contraction. It's not expansive. And that creates stress on your nervous system, to have everything so tight and locked in. And so there's only so long that you can live like that before, something changes.
Which begs the question, in
Yeah,
all healing, is there a control versus a surrender, even a spiritual surrender component to helping us
undoubtedly.
heal our bodies?
Undoubtedly. Very
Why do
much
you
so.
why do you believe that?
Because I lived it. Because I lived it. I had to give up control. I had to give up all control. I had to completely relinquish everything. And now I did it in a way that is incredibly intense, super profound, and I wouldn't recommend it for the average person. But I did. I just closed all my businesses and walked away from everything and changed my whole life in the course of a year. Um, because it was just suddenly so clear to me that the way I was leading my life with all of this control, um, in service of keeping my nervous system dysregulated, where I had no relationship with my nervous system, and it was all about my diet and my environment. And that's very confusing for your body and your nervous system, right? So, once I was able to align all of these things, my subconscious, my heart, my soul, my mind, like create full alignment and then really work a lot on nervous system regulation and surrender, and realizing that you're not the one who's actually in control and trusting a whole new source of your wellness and where your wellness really comes from. Then suddenly my entire life changed and my entire health changed. It just so profoundly and vastly. It was without me actually muscling through and trying so hard, where everything is so difficult and stressful and all these markers and things you have to do. It was more of just like allowing and creating this expansion within yourself. And then your body just loves that and just gobbles it up and just wants to fill that void and with nothing but like health and well-being and joy and happiness. And then from there alignment happens, and from alignment comes healing, and it's really profound.
I've heard from many people that the surrender part is really part of a spiritual journey because when you're surrendering and you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to do what the doctors want me to do. I'm going to take this other path. But what if it doesn't work? And what if the doctors are right? And then they go back to, no, I'm being led to follow my guidance, my intuition to do this diet thing, like in your case. How did you navigate that? What was your spiritual component, or was there one that came in that really kinda helped steer you to stay on the holistic path, even though it was completely opposite of what your physicians were suggesting that you do?
Yeah, that's such a profound question. And it's really, really true. I think that a lot of us have this disconnection, or it's very difficult to access this idea that our soul is just as much a part of our journey in this lifetime. And our relationship to something bigger than ourselves is just as much and present in our lifetime, even if we don't have a deep connection to it. And I think like initially in my process, it was just about, I don't know, I just knew, even though like the first time I tried to tell my family that I wasn't going to get treatment from MS with pharmaceutical intervention, they were very, very upset and very concerned for me and everything like that. There's a lot of pressure that comes in. And so I think by slow degrees, I had to learn to trust myself in the face of outside people telling me it was gonna be bad, or even like the type of restaurant that I opened, everyone told me that no one would ever eat at my restaurant because it was gluten-free and free of all these primary allergens and all based in holistic nutrition and natural food cookery, and people are like, "No one's gonna eat that food." And I'm like, "I don't know, I'm a pretty good cook." And then it ended up being 3 locations and many food brands and incredibly successful. So I just think by slow degrees, I just started to trust myself. But the spiritual component really came in when I closed my business. And I knew it was just a true divine intervention that said, you're done, that there is more, there, that there's more ways for me to help people than what I was doing before. And that was my dream with food, was to help connect people with the healing, how healing food is. And that was really my mission for like a decade, was to just really connect people with the vast healing potential of natural food and vegetables and even ethical animal protein and things like that. But it was really almost like a divine intervention, and this force field that came in and just commanded me to stop immediately. And it was so visceral and so felt. I will never forget it. I was standing in my kitchen, and it was like a force field I just couldn't go through, and I couldn't walk away from, because it was so visceral. And so I did. I closed my restaurant 4 days later, and then I closed the rest of my businesses in the next month. And from there, went into like a whole true dark night of the soul, where you're really, really deeply, deeply, deeply in a whole nother place of healing and reconciliation and reckoning, deep reckoning with all that is, and surrendering more deeply than you ever have before. And in that process, you do become more connected with the divine and to something greater than yourself. Even though my mind would still be like, I don't know, that's kind of crazy. But I did. I took myself to Costa Rica and lived by myself in the jungle for a year so I could really, and worked with local healers there to really deepen my connection to my divinity and my soul's path, and recognizing that the ways in which I'd made decisions, these vast, very bold decisions, whether it was to treat myself naturally of MS 20 years ago or to open a restaurant that nobody understood. During my healing process, I also went and got a fecal transplant in Great Britain in like 2018, which nobody had ever heard of. That was like at the very beginning of our understanding of the microbiome. But to go back to that mast cell thing to kind of fix all that, I was like, I just need to do that. So I'm pretty used to doing these pretty bold things that a lot of other people don't really understand. But I say all that because that was a lot of this work for me in this last year is really developing my alignment with my soul's journey in this lifetime, uh, becoming very aware and in tune of my own intuition, um, becoming very attuned to the nervous system and how the nervous system really works in the body and what the nervous system, how to really create communication channel with your nervous system. And yeah, so I guess that's a long-winded answer to your question about surrender and a soul's journey and divinity and being guided and all of those other ways of our conversation.
You say that healing can't happen in fight or flight. Why not?
Mm. Because your nervous system isn't actually in a place where it can heal. It's in a place of keeping you safe, and it's busy keeping you safe from all of these different things and not allowing the full healing expression to actually manifest and come through. And if you don't have a place where you feel safety within, because if you're fighting or flighting or freezing or fawning or anything like that, then these are all defense mechanisms and you're not feeling safety within. And if you're not feeling safety within, it's really hard to heal, you know?
Not to mention the cortisol levels and the norepinephrine levels that are
Yeah.
heightened when we're in fight or
Yeah.
flight, which causes
Yeah.
inflammation, and inflammation is the
Yeah.
root cause of all disease and illness.
Yeah.
So
Exactly right.
it's a hamster wheel when we're
Yeah.
in fight or
Exactly.
flight. I agree with you on
Yeah.
that. Couple more questions as we're winding
Mhm.
down here. I could talk to you all day, girl.
Me too. Let's keep going.
Looking back, what spiritual insights did your journey reveal to you about the connection between illness, purpose, and the soul's evolution? What have you noticed you how have your spiritual senses, let's use that as a phrase, evolved as you've gone through this health journey over the past
Mm.
20 years?
Wow, that is a deep question. So, my answer is I believe that we all come here with a core wound or more to heal in this lifetime. And a lot of times, these core wounds live in our shadows, and we're not fully aware of them and how they run our life. And that's kind of what our path in this lifetime is to determine this core wound, because what'll happen is it'll keep showing up in your life over and over and over again in a million different ways until you actually see it. And then when you can see it, you can heal it. And until you see it, you can't heal it. And so a lot of times those are relationships or circumstances that keep presenting themselves to you over and over and over again. People will say, like, I keep having these kind of relationships, or I keep getting this kind of a job, or like I keep getting this kind of illness over and over. Like there's certain things that repeat over and over again. And I've only seen this I've seen this with so many people, and you probably see this with a lot of your clients as well. It's, and because it acts in the shadow, we don't see it ourselves, and that's why sometimes having a guide or having a mentor or having somebody trusted who can see some of these distortions that you're just really not able to see. Um, but I think once you're able to see them, taking action and recognizing it, owning it, and taking action s- to heal it, so you can be healed of the sole reason why you came into this world. I definitely know I've lived my own version of that. You know. my own soul's wounds to heal in this lifetime.
Yeah, it's been my experience both personally and with working with lots of clients over the years that once we illuminate what that is, it eradicates it almost instantly. And the
Almost
work
instantly.
it's really fascinating how we'll go, "Oh," and it's just an instant relief from something that we didn't even know was there.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can't unsee the truth when you know it's the truth. You can't unsee it. You can't turn a blind eye. You can't. I mean, it's just so obvious and it's so there that you can't unsee it. And so then it's really beautiful because then it wants to be healed. It wants to be seen, and then it heals really quickly. Actually, once you actually see it, yeah, your body wants to be like, oh, I'm done with that. Finally, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find too that it's easier for us to take action then because we know what the root cause is and we know, okay, this is part of what we need to do to heal, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of resistance.
No, that's what's so fascinating. I feel the exact same way. It's almost like you're eager to be done with it because once you see it, you can't unsee it and you're just like, "Oh my god, well like let's fix that immediately." And it's really fascinating because I wonder that sense of like let's fix that immediately and I can't unsee it and I want to take the right action, does that come from your head? Or does that come from your soul's desire to make these changes? I don't think it's this thinking thing. I think it comes from this deeper sense of like truth and intuition. Like that has to be fixed, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
How can somebody start exploring holistic healing safely alongside traditional care?
Well, I think all of it is fairly safe. I do believe that there's a way in which you can pursue it and it's a waste of money and it doesn't lead to lasting change. And I think that that's based upon you deciding to do it because an influencer does it or somebody says you should or you saw it on TV or you saw a video on YouTube or all these external things, as opposed to sitting with yourself really deeply and saying like, wow, what is it that I feel the most called to do as my next step? You know, some people will everybody will have maybe a different idea of what that is. Some people want to pursue, like, let's say, Eastern modalities, or some people want to pursue body work, or some people want to pursue, like, emotional release, or, none of it's wrong. But I think really determining what it is from within you and back to that whole idea again, like where did this idea come from? Does it come from your head, like an outside expectation? Somebody suggested this, oh, you should do this, this mind thing, or does it come from this true felt sense, like that inner the intuition, the soul gives you the intuitive downloads of what the next path is. And so it's like, is where in within you is this truth coming from and this desire? And then oftentimes then can you use that as a way to integrate? Can you integrate these things and these natural healing things into the healing matrix of your own body, right? So it's like, for example, me and the food and the diet. Like it'd be one thing if, like, let's say I thought I should do this diet and I did it for 6 weeks and then I went back to eating Big Macs. Did I integrate that into my healing path or was that just like this flash in the pan thing? And so I think like, well, no, I integrated it and became my entire life. And so how are we able to integrate any of these things that we feel like we learn in our alternative healing exploration and integrate that into another layer of our healing path or our healing journey, you know? I think it has a lot to do with the integration and and not chasing things that are silly, like you saw it on late night TV and some infomercial or something like that, you know what I mean?
Oh, goodness. Last question, why do we incarnate?
I think that maybe goes all the way back to those healing those core wounds. I think that we're all here to learn certain things in this lifetime and to heal certain wounds and also to live a life's path and live a life of like because I think that this is one of the most beautiful parts too of helping people connect to their true healing path is like what is this life that you're supposed to live, like what does that look like? is it supposed to be in service of this illness and this disease or these relationships that don't serve you or the job that you hate or did your soul come here to have a fuller, richer life in this only life that you have? And so I think that it's determining like what what does your soul want to do in this life and how full of a life do you want to live? And what is your true purpose? So your purpose and healing these wounds that, are always here ready to be seen and want to be seen and healed, for your further evolution in this lifetime and the next.
Beautifully said. You're extraordinary. You're a role model for healing, and I kudos to you for having the courage to really put this out to the masses to let people know, "Hey, it was 6 weeks with this. Sorry, we're so sorry you're screwed. You have MS. There isn't anything we can do for you. You're gonna be blind in a wheelchair and an invalid." And you're like, "Yeah, not so much." And and I didn't get the sense that you were trying to prove the doctors wrong. You were just like, "Yeah, that doesn't resonate with me." And
Yeah, totally. It had nothing to do with that.
the other thing that I wanna mention is that the whole time we've been chatting, the goddess Isis has been standing behind you, behind your left shoulder. She's one of your main spirit guides, if not your main spirit guide. And she's kind of like the queen goddess of it all. And she's
Wow.
all about serving the masses and creating life and creating health and spirituality and all of that. So, you know how Isis has her wings? If you look at a picture of Isis, she has her wings spread out. And her wings have been spread out this whole time. So it'll be
Wow.
interesting if you decide to just do a deep dive on Isis and the spiritual meaning of Isis, because she is absolutely advising you on this journey and the journey to help educate the world on really what's possible from using yourself as an example. So really
Wow,
interesting. Yeah, I don't see
that's
that very often, and
amazing.
I we've done over 700 of these episodes, and I don't know, I've never seen Isis before, but I don't it's not very often that I'll see a spirit guide over somebody's shoulder, and she's just
Wow.
standing behind you. Yeah, behind your left
Wow.
shoulder.
That's incredibly powerful what you just shared with me. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
how can people learn more about you and your work?
Wow. Well, visit my website, christineruch.com. Christine, and my last name is Ruch, christineruch.com. And come and visit me. Come and visit my website and also book a call with me. Like, let's talk. I give freely of my time and I love to chat with people about their health and their curiosity and what's possible and the potential. And then also, if you want to get to know me more passively, you can visit my Substack where I write about the healing path and how all the ways in which we heal. And I also have some good recipes on there and good food, and I just talk about how I see the healing path unfold and vibration and frequency of the healing path. Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Alrighty,
Thank you.
everybody. You got lots to think about in this episode.
Thank
I mean,
you.
we gave
It was
just
such an honor to be on this show. I really appreciate it.
oh, my honor to have you. In the meantime, we're sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah, and from
Mwah!
Colorado too,
From Boulder, Colorado.
where Christine is. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends.